Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Conversations on Care, a Facebook talk show bringing together service providers, clients, and caregivers to help families better understand and cope with aging parents with chronic care needs. My name is Julie Collada, and I am the founder and president of Open Arms Solutions. And Open Arms is a home care agency serving the Chicagoland area, focusing on inspired home care solutions for seniors with chronic care needs such as dementia, Parkinson's, and other movement disorders. It is our mission to help families through this journey and to know that their loved one is living their best life possible. If you find these dialogues helpful, please give us a like and a share, excuse me, so that we can reach more people who need it. If you have any questions on topics you'd like to learn more about, please write them in the chat box in the comments below, and we will do our best to fit them into our Facebook Live program. With me today is Emily Mysel of Family Service of Glencoe. Emily is a senior program manager and a licensed clinical social worker there. And our topic today is an important one: how to help your community be more dementia friendly. Welcome, Emily. It's really nice to have time to talk with you and learn more about what you're doing in our community. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Julie. I'm so happy to be here this morning.
Thank you very much. I'd love to ask people who are on this program, because I know everyone's interested to know, what started on your journey to become a clinical licensed social worker, and then ultimately in your role at Family Services of Glencoe?
Yeah, well, the journey to get here has been an interesting one. I went to college for social work, psychology, and thought I wanted to be a social worker. It's kind of embedded in me. My father is a licensed clinical social worker as well. And I was very blessed to be raised by 4 grandparents who lived in Northbrook, and they were a huge part of my life. They participated in everything, and they really inspired me. My grandfather had multiple sclerosis, and he lived in a nursing home when I was, 8 years old. And I used to visit when I'd come to town, and I enjoyed being in those nursing homes so much. I used to feed him, take him on strolls. And then I ended up just engaging with all the residents there. So I really have always felt comfortable with the older adult population. I ended up doing an internship at a nursing home, skilled nursing facility, and then went back to get my master's in social work. I've run memory care communities. I worked on the Alzheimer's Association helpline, a 24-hour line where people could call if they had questions. I've always really felt connected to the older population. And then personally, my grandfather was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2011, and then he passed away in 2016. And now my maternal grandmother has vascular dementia and is living in a memory care community. So, professionally and personally, it hits close to home.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you and I were chatting about our different paths and what got us to where we are today, right? And our paths almost crossed a little bit, where
Right.
my mom was in one of those memory care communities, and I think at that point we figured out when we were talking, you were running some of the activity programs.
Exactly. Yeah. I spent a lot of time making sure the people living with dementia had quality programming and support. And my favorite thing to do was paint nails, which, was something that helped keep the residents and individuals calm and engaged. So I loved participating in all those programs.
I as I listen to you and I listen about your experience that working in senior living communities and started so young, I know that and I know this is true for myself. When I discovered when I was going through my journey with my mom, and it was a part of myself that I really hadn't discovered till I'd gone through that with her, was how important it was and how meaningful it was to get a smile from her. And it just made the difference I know, her day in my day. And it's just that, maybe that's simple. And then as time went on and I started to spend more time with her in these different communities and interacting with other seniors, I think it just, for people that really inspires them and really makes a difference, those are the folks we really are so excited about recruiting here at Open Arms, because we have an amazing team of people. I'm incredibly proud of them. But that's a characteristic. Compassion is one of our core values. And, whether it's empathy or compassion, it's just that being able to feel so great about giving to a senior and making a difference in their lives. And so I definitely heard that in your description. So what brought you to your current role at Family Services of Glencoe?
So before I arrived at Family Service of Glencoe, they did a needs assessment for the community. And Family Service of Glencoe has been around for 107 years and really focused on, they are the social service agency for the community. But there was a gap. The seniors, the older adults, were not part of that. They had a senior discussion group, which we still have going on, that meets once a month, now on Zoom. But there was a need. So they created this position, and I thought it was a great way to get involved. And I've been there for 3.5 years. I work with every older adult and their family member who needs me in the community, even though they may not know they need me. I, am available if I get a lot of calls, random calls about, who they trust for a handyman, or if I'll come over and talk about, end of life stuff. So I'm kind of available for any need for someone 65 and older, and just kind of working through the aging process in general. I also work closely with the village of Glencoe. So if they have residents that they're concerned about, we'll work together and brainstorm about safety plans. Closely with Glencoe Public Safety as well. I serve as a crisis response worker, and I go out to homes and help support individuals living with the disease and their loved ones, anything from wandering related issues to having issues with caregivers, or, arguments between the person living and their care partner, if it's bathing issues to just safety. I'll also go to the hospital to meet seniors to make sure the transport goes well and make sure that they're supported.
That's great. And it's so important. And I'm imagining that there are people who are listening today that really didn't know that communities would offer this kind of important service. And what you and I were talking about just before we went live this morning is you work very closely with your peers in neighboring communities. So it really, it's, from what I understand, and communities like Highland Park and Northbrook, and I don't know if it's the majority of communities in the area, but many have social workers in a role similar to yours.
Yes, we do. We're very blessed to have the resources, and in many police departments, there are police social workers. So we do connect around cases. Wandering is a huge issue for people living with dementia. We've had quite a few people, unfortunately, have really poor outcomes. And I think we need more education. A couple of years ago, I was part of the group that went to Springfield to lobby for the Silver Alert program. We have an Amber Alert program, but when seniors go missing, it's called Silver Alert. And there's an alert, on the screen when you drive down into the city, and they let those be known. So I was part of that lobbying process for Silver Alert in Springfield. That was a great experience. And I think the power of social work, and something that I teach my interns all the time, like, keep that Rolodex of contacts. You never know who you're going to need. You never know what's going to come across your desk, and what resources you're going to need for your clients, for the families that you're working with. So I really try to maintain those relationships in case I need that support for my clients.
Yeah, that was kind of a lesson I learned when I started the company 14 years ago, is when you go into a family and they have a need, and it may not, and often it's not the need you can provide, but you really feel compelled to find that solution. I mean, it's really our responsibility to find that solution. So really being able to branch out and find out resources it's incredibly important for what we do. So,
of course. And not just giving them a phone number to say good luck. You want to make sure the person on the other end knows how to help them and knows that they're going to be put in good hands.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk about, the topic is how to develop a more dementia-friendly community. Just some stats that I know I'm imagining you're familiar with very well, Emily. but some things that just for some folks that might not know, currently there are over 6 million Americans living with some form of, well, it's actually Alzheimer's disease specifically. There's a larger number that are working with the different types of dementias, and Alzheimer's is one type of dementia, as you well know. But the dementia is an umbrella term. So there's vascular dementia, which you shared, touched you personally, and there are all sorts of frontal lobe, temporal lobe dementias, all sorts of different kinds of dementias. So that number, I imagine, is much larger than 6 million, and forecast to more than double by 2050. And as much research and work that's going into this, as you know, there's no cure at this point. So it's really an epidemic. You know, those of us that work in the industry understand that it's an epidemic, and it's so this topic of creating a dementia-friendly community will only become more and more important as time goes on. So can you describe from your perspective what you mean by developing a more dementia-friendly community?
Of course. So in 2015, the Dementia-Friendly America initiative began. It started in Minnesota. And since then, it's really taken course across the country. Currently, there are 19 communities in Illinois that are dementia-friendly communities. The Austin neighborhood just was recognized just recently. So a dementia-friendly community is a place where people living with the dementia and their care partners are included, are engaged, are part of the planning process, and they're active members. I mean, you think about someone living with dementia in the community, their ability to navigate, their depth perception, maybe how they articulate their needs is challenged in many ways. So how can they go into the world? How can they go into the local Walgreens or the bank and make sure the person responding to their need allows them the time and the space to articulate what they need? Or if they're acting differently than normal, how is that person going to know what to do? How are they going to help them? There's that big thing of see something, say something. If someone is walking down the street and it's 90 degrees out and they're wearing a winter coat, maybe they're wandered away from home. So I think we sometimes don't want to take on the stress or the burden of our neighbors because it's a lot, but a lot of times we can intervene and be so helpful in ways that we don't even know how. I also believe that dementia-friendly communities can be more inclusive by the way they design the spaces, having access, having larger print on the menus. A lot of times a black mat, a little small rug, for someone living with dementia, that could look like a hole in the floor. So being aware of how our environment contributes or helps someone living with dementia live a fulfilling, good quality of life.
That's great. You mentioned when we were talking about this session yesterday that one of the things that contributes is the training of police, which I thought was really important. Can you describe a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So part of the movement is called Dementia Friends, and it's a really easy 15-minute, you go on the website, you follow through their steps, and you get a certificate. So one of our goals for Dementia-Friendly Glencoe, we became a dementia-friendly community in 2019, and we had all our Glencoe public safety officers trained. So they are all dementia friends. And then I actually live in Deerfield, and all of the Deerfield Police Department are dementia friends as well. And I think it helps with just engaging, questions to ask. I think language is key. I really work on people when they say someone's suffering from dementia, to changing the language that they're living, that they're care partners, not caregivers. A partner means you're there working together versus caregiving, you're doing the work. And so someone with the disease is still part of the plan of care. So the officers are really trained, the ones that I work with particularly, to pick up on behaviors, recognizing, asking the right questions, kind of understanding where they are orientation wise. Many times, if there's an instance of wandering or concern, the officers and I will go out to the home and talk to the family and kind of assess the environment. make sure that they're safe, making sure that they have interventions in place so the person can still live at home and allow the care partner or family member to feel good about how the person navigates the space that they're living in.
Sure. I think that, I think that the statistics, and, I'm sure you've gone through education as I have too, about the risk of elopement.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that's so challenging, and I had my family member elope, and it was just the most frightening thing in the world. And I think I shared with you, she lived in Lincolnshire, and, you get that call. We actually got a call from our caregiver who said, Mitzi's not in the house, and it's just sheer panic.
Of course.
And knowing what I know about people who elope, I mean, unfortunately, especially in the winter and really tough weather, most people are found, very close to the home.
Mm-hmm.
All too often it's a very sad outcome. And so when you described, if you see it, say it, or something looks,
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't look right, I think in our society today in general, we don't necessarily, we're worried about interfering or butting in or not being appropriate. But I appreciate what you said. I think the first concern is safety for seniors. So if doesn't seem like they're dressed appropriately, or they're just seem a little flustered, go and say something. My husband and I were working through the forest preserves at Fort Sheridan, which are lovely.
Mm-hmm.
And this lovely woman, silver-haired woman, I'm guessing she was in her 80s, was by herself. It was gorgeous, and she was looking out at Lake Michigan, right? And I hesitated, and I thought, I don't want to, make her feel bad. But I walked up to her and I said, "Hey, I'm just checking. Is everything okay?" And she was as warm and wonderful, and she was perfectly fine. But I knew that I did the right thing by checking in.
And I think the challenge, like you said, is, do we want to interfere? We don't. And it's asking the right questions. And many of us are comfortable asking those questions. I mean, everyone laughs when they see me. If I see someone struggling with folding their walker at a restaurant, like, I'll run over and fold it for them because that's just my comfort. But I worked with the public safety officers in Glencoe to ask the certain questions. So if there is a wandering issue, to ask, where does the person think they are in their lifespan? So if the person has wandered out, do they think they're still working? Do they think they're 30? So then we can kind of figure out where they went. They usually go in the direction of their dominant hand. So they usually will turn right. A lot of times they'll go towards water, and Glencoe's right off Lake Michigan, which is similar to people who are diagnosed with autism as well.
Yeah.
And they don't, like you said, they don't go far, but they do, a lot of the outcomes do not turn out very well. So asking the right questions, where do they believe they are in their stage of life? And what are their interests? What do they typically do? What time of day do they usually go to this place? So trying to gather that information to kind of direct how we find the person. Many times they have come back, but it's just those are really important questions to ask. So I made a list of questions for the officers to use when they go out on those calls.
That's great. So what does it look like? What does it look like for people who have dementia? We were talking a little bit about this yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
right? You asked about questions, but I think a lot of us have a stereotype. I know I did.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of younger people that have dementia. So can you describe that? What someone with dementia, age, other characteristics?
Of course. And I think what you said, we talked about yesterday, and the fact is, when we envision someone living with this disease, we think of like someone in the nursing home, doesn't recognize their children, unable to feed themselves maybe. But there are plenty of people living in our community that we don't even know have a dementia diagnosis, that they might not even know they have a dementia diagnosis. So as you mentioned, frontal temporal dementias tend to get people hit people 65 and younger. So those individuals, you would never know. And it's not their memory that's impaired. It's their impulsivity, their executive functioning, their judgment. So you're not dealing with someone who can't tell you what day of the week it is. You're dealing with someone who will go buy 3 cars at the car lot because they have nothing in their head telling them, hey, this is not appropriate. I don't need to buy 3 cars. So I think the person living with the disease is different and doesn't look like what we think. And I think a lot of times, we have to be knowledgeable about, how are they articulating their needs, if they're dressed appropriately, if they're forgetful, if they seem disheveled. I think we have to just pick up on other signs other things may be going on. But I think the face of dementia doesn't look like the face of dementia. I mean, the biggest risk factor is age. But after that, we all have chances of having Alzheimer's disease and related dementia. So I think it's really important to know the different types, learn about them, educate yourself. I think knowledge is key. It's power to understanding everything. So the more we understand about the types, the more we are responding to individuals living with it.
Yeah, that's important information to share. So you actually go on calls with police officers, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kinds of things do you see when you go on calls? Can you give some examples of things that you see and the police officer sees related to, going to seniors' homes and might help people be educated to think about their own families?
Yeah. So in one particular case, we had an individual woman who never got an official diagnosis. Another challenge is people who do have dementia who never get an official diagnosis, which is challenging for the whole family system. Just kind of planning ahead and knowing the course and making sure you have a team. I really am about having a team of support, helping the family navigate. So this individual was never officially diagnosed, but she had a caregiver and she didn't recognize her caregiver many times. And she would call the police every time. And so because I had a relationship with her, the officers had me go out to mediate and kind of navigate for her, reassure her. She knew who I was, but they kept sending new caregivers every week and she didn't trust them or they weren't trained. I mean, I think you are aware of how important training is for caregivers, hired caregivers. So this woman would say things like, I was trying to say, oh, your caregiver is friends with your other caregiver. She's out because she had to run an errand. And the caregiver looked at me and said, I don't know her caregiver. And I said, why would you say that? Kind of the therapeutic fibs, anything that's comforting, that doesn't cause pain is really important. So in that call, the officers just had me come out and kind of facilitate that conversation, diffuse, and we were able to come to a good place, and ended up the family came out and took her to lunch and we kind of redirected for a while. So that was one situation. Other time is, a care partner is burned out and, they're aging as well and aging at a different pace, a little bit slower than the person living with the disease. And it's enough. And a lot of falls and trips to the hospital. So I'll come out and just introduce myself and I'm here to support. I'm here to give resources and just making sure as the disease progresses, either if the person chooses to stay at home, that we have adaptations, we create a community at home that's safe, getting a hospital bed in or, getting a lift chair, or if it's finding the right community for them to move to. So I kind of help facilitate all of those. And in the first point of contact, really the officers to kind of direct me to the homes that are most in need.
Those are some good examples. I think that's what's really important is, education and understanding the wear and tear and stress on family members, and how important educating family members is. I've sat on some different committees in senior living with leaders of different senior living communities. And when asked, what are your biggest challenges when you're working with people with dementia? And it was uniformly working with their families and helping their families through it. And sometimes, and I know I was absolutely guilty of this before, I I started Open Arms, and my mom went to Gidwitz and, the Friends Center. I was in denial about her disease. Here was an incredibly intelligent, politically active woman, and now I wasn't really willing to accept her current situation, why she kept asking me questions over and over again, and why she would get very agitated and frustrated and couldn't remember how to use a microwave. I just didn't understand it. And I was really very apt to just ultimately not believe it. And what we have found when we went around and talked to the senior living leaders in the community, that was one of the main challenges is family members in denial, family members not understanding the disease of dementia, the different kinds of dementias, the progressions, and the fact that ultimately it's not curable. And if people don't understand it, it makes it so much more difficult to, if you don't understand the disease, if you understand the disease, it's still very, very, very difficult and trying. But if someone keeps asking you, what time is it? What time is it? What day it is? And you do understand that something physically is going on in the brain that's causing that, I think, and I've gotten feedback, and I believe, and it was true for me too, it's easier to understand. And if you get techniques and strategies, you mentioned, therapeutic lie, there's just different kinds of techniques that can help, family caregivers through the incredible challenge. And then the other thing that you mentioned that you provide at Family Services of Glencoe is the counseling and support for family members. They're suffering, in my opinion, as much or more the perfect person that actually has the disease. Your partner is different. Your responsibilities are more. And so I think for all of us that care for seniors with dementia or anyone with dementia, really trying to put ourselves in their shoes and their family members' shoes and listening and understanding and being there for them is such an important role. So the counseling you do is so important. Can you talk a little bit about, in the few minutes that we have left, the kind of counseling you have done and you do at Family Services and other people do in the community that could be helpful to family members?
Of course. I think the challenge with having a dementia diagnosis for your loved one is you're grieving a loss. You're grieving the person they once were, and you're redefining your role, especially if it's a spouse. I've sat with so many, I used to run a support group for mostly women care partners and their husbands struggling. And they just said, this is no longer my partner. I can't brainstorm ideas. I can't process, our challenges, our children's struggles. I don't know how to navigate. I don't know how to do bill paying. I don't know how to drive the car. Especially the older generation where the roles were really defined much more than I think the younger generations have. But the counseling's a lot about, grief and loss, how to maintain that relationship. I always encourage care partners to be the care partner, to still be the husband or wife and not be the caregiver. If you don't want to toilet them, you don't have to. Let's find a resource. I want to maintain those boundaries. I watched my grandmother care for my grandfather who had Alzheimer's, and we talked about self-care. My grandmother unfortunately passed away shortly thereafter because she just invested so much of her life in his care, and it was just heartbreaking. So a lot of it is redefining your roles, going through that loss and the grief of just losing your partner and what you used to have. And also when it hits younger, when they're in their 50s or 60s, loss, thinking about what you thought your retirement was going to look like, what you wanted to do as a couple. You're having to put that all aside, and redirecting energy and understanding the disease is so important with that. And I agree that the families are the biggest challenge. And when I used to run my memory cares, and I would, have to say that the person needed the memory care versus they would act like I'm not seeing what they see. And I keep saying, if you put people in an environment that's more appropriate, kind of like the Dementia-Friendly community, they're going to be more successful. They're going to strive. So if they're able to be more independent in a space that is understanding of their diagnosis, they're going to have a better quality of life.
Absolutely. That's so important. Very well said. Hey, there's a viewer question. Do other cities in the Chicago area provide similar services? Who would be a good first contact if someone has concerns for their loved ones?
So every community is different. Many times there are senior centers that are a great place to start in the area. I would reach out to the senior center in your local community. Your township has resources as well. We have great townships, and people are happy. You're happy to email me. I can direct you to contacts in the area if you're looking for resources and support.
That's great. And I think your email information is below. So for people watching, how do you get an action team together to create a dementia-friendly community?
Well, I think it takes, every community is so different. So every community is designed differently. It runs differently. So I would try to get together all the key leaders, the key players. It could be the mayor, the village manager, the chief of police, the fire chief, the park district. We have our school superintendent at District 35, Dr. Catherine Wang. She is on board. The kids are even participating in our dementia-friendly initiative. So I would get in all those key leaders, the clergy, whomever is an active and vocal person and has a little pull, and start there. Kind of defining what the issues are, the problems, areas of strengths, and areas of limitations and gaps. And I would start with those key leaders.
Great suggestion. Well, Emily, we're out of time.
Flew by.
It did. It did. I mean, thank you for being on board. It's such a great topic, an important topic. Thank you so much for the work you do. I am sure you make a big difference in the lives of the families in Glencoe and in Deerfield, which is also my community. So thank you for everything you do in Deerfield. It's been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit better, and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Julie.